Hosted by you/Prudent Composer 3500. My ex-wife and I were married for over 20 years and have 2 children together, 22M and 20F. For most of my marriage, things were pretty balanced. We both shared housework and childcare responsibilities. We were each stay-at-home parents for over a year after each child, her with our son, and me with both our son and daughter. We always had agreements on how we wanted to divide work and generally had decent communication. This changed when my oldest went to high school. My wife got a new job that was both very demanding on her time and required 50% travel. This meant that I had to handle everything about 2 weeks per month, and when she was home, she wasn't holding up her side of the work as per our agreements. I did my best to be accommodating, and we worked through redistributing chores and housework a few times to better fit her schedule, but a lot of the work just kept falling to me. When the pandemic happened, things got worse, but I tried to just suck it up because I knew the lockdowns were temporary. Finally, when things opened back up, the situation continued to decline, and I asked to go to counseling. She missed a lot of our meetings and just didn't commit to it. At that point, I decided that I wanted a divorce. Unfortunately, it was a really tough time for the family. My son was preparing for college in person after his freshman year being remote, which was both a financial and logistical challenge. At the same time, my daughter was also struggling with depression, and I had become her main support person with my wife gone half the time. I made the decision to wait until my daughter was in a better mental state and our family was in a financially stable place before filing for divorce. I did my best to continue contributing and was essentially a single parent for 3 years. On a few occasions, I brought up counseling again, but my wife said, things were good and wouldn't go. We pretty much didn't have sex during that time, and there was one summer when she essentially moved to North Carolina for 6 weeks for work. She came home on some weekends. Last year, after my daughter started her sophomore year of college and was in a better place mentally and emotionally, I sold off some of my stock investments to create a trust for my kids to ensure their college was covered. Then I filed for divorce. At first, my wife was really angry, then she left to live in North Carolina again. When she came back 4 weeks later, she said she wanted to work through it, but I told her I had made the decision to leave years ago and wasn't interested. We eventually worked through mediation and had an amicable divorce. My kids live with me now and support me, but all of my in-laws and even most of my family, outside of my sister, think I'm the jerk. They believe I should have forced the issue more when we started counseling and either divorced earlier or made it clearer to my wife how important counseling was to me. They've called me selfish, and some of my in-laws are refusing to interact with my kids when they're at my house. For example, my daughter FaceTimed her grandmother once this summer, and she hung up once she saw that my daughter was at my house. They also created a bit of a scene at my son's graduation in the spring, refusing to acknowledge me and demanding that my son choose to celebrate with them or me rather than having dinner together as a group. I encouraged my son to go with them, and we had our own celebration later, but something happened at the dinner, and my son has been living with me and is now almost no contact with them. I honestly feel like I did what was best for my kids, but now it feels like their mom's family is punishing them, and I feel like a terrible father. I admit that it might have been more mature to address the issue head-on with my relationship with my ex, but I felt that it was about more than just the two of us. Frankly, I feel like my lack of backbone years ago has made this divorce worse for my kids, but I also believe that if I had to do it again, I would still prioritize my kids over my own feelings and make the same choice. Am I the jerk here? Edit. Holy crap, this blew up. First off, thanks to everyone who provided feedback and comments. I really felt terrible, and both the positive and negative comments helped me gain a little perspective on things. I've noticed a few comments come up multiple times, so I figure it's worth addressing them here before I move on. When my wife took the job, we were doing well financially, but the job still came with a big raise. I was making about $200K, and the job she took raised her salary from about $80K to $140K. That increase allowed us to go from simply saving for an emergency fund to having enough to pay for our kids' college outright. We both work in tech, but she works for a defense contractor, and some of the work needs to be done on site. Only one of the offices relevant to her work is near where we live. When we originally discussed the job, her plan was to work in the high travel role for a while and then try to transfer to a lower travel role based near us. She got promoted a few times, and staying near our home wasn't an option unless she took a significant pay and title cut. When we divorced, I was making about $280K, and she was earning a little over $300K. Some folks were also confused by my stock comment. I'm a software engineer for a big tech company, and about 20 to 30% of my salary comes in the form of RSUs, restricted stock units. I'm not an investor by any means, I was just selling off stock mostly to cover my daughter's college expenses and pay off the debt my son had. I know a lot of people are jumping straight to an affair, but I really doubt that. In school, my wife and I were the obnoxious kids who reminded the teacher about homework, and she's a massive introvert. Her working late in a hotel room is far more likely than her sleeping around or keeping some secret family. There's always a chance I'm wrong here, but I think this is more of a situation where Reddit sometimes assumes all divorces involve infidelity. When I say we had an amicable divorce, I mean that more in the legal sense than the emotional sense. Uncontested might be a better term. The only significant asset we had that wasn't easily split was our home. My wife loves the house, and I frankly wanted something different, so she bought out my portion of it. Our kids are adults, so there was no custody issue. Our assets were mostly divisible, so there were no major complications there. Our salaries were comparable, so there was no alimony. We each had a car. Overall, it was pretty straightforward to divide things evenly, and neither of us wanted to drag it out. We didn't end the marriage as friends by any means, but from a legal standpoint, it was amicable because we settled everything with a mediator and only briefly involved lawyers to draft the final paperwork for the judge to sign off on. Commenter: I don't know. There is so much information missing. Of course, I realize it is because it is one-sided, but still. Why would your ex's family have such a strong reaction, and why would your children support you if the divorce was amicable? I mean, she is their mother, she hasn't cheated, she isn't abusive, and I am pretty sure her income provided for her children too. There's just so much missing information here. Ops response: I tried to clarify in the edit that the divorce was not really amicable in the emotional sense, but more in the legal sense. We went through a mediator rather than lawyers. I think my kids supported me largely for the same reasons I left the marriage. My wife hadn't really been a part of our family for years. It's not like she was coming home, refusing to help around the house, treating me like garbage, but then being a wonderful mother to the kids. Not cheating and not being abusive is below the bare minimum for a partner. She missed a lot of plays, concerts, and other special events for our kids. She didn't really keep up with the kids' interests, she didn't really know their friends, she just wasn't there much. She was never actively mean or abusive in any way, but she was also just kind of non-participatory. When the grandparents started taking sides and saying terrible things about me, the kids pushed back. Both kids chose to live with me. Update 4 months later. I'm still receiving comments and messages from time to time about that post, so I figured I would take a moment to provide an update. Quick summary of the original post: my wife became increasingly distant in our marriage, and I decided to get a divorce. However, I waited about 3 years to go through with it because I felt it was best for the kids. My kids chose to live with me and were generally on my side, but my in-laws and family were pretty upset with me. Things are going much better overall since the post. I received a lot of support but also quite a bit of criticism, which I took to heart. I've been making an effort to mend fences and work toward a more reasonable state of affairs. I don't expect my ex or her family to be friends with me, but I at least want us to be on good terms. My relationship with my parents and family has significantly improved, and this Christmas felt pretty much back to normal. My family is very conservative, especially when it comes to marriage. They believe the only reason for divorce is infidelity or abuse, but they've finally come to understand how bad things had become and have reluctantly accepted the situation. My relationship with my ex, and more importantly, her relationship with our kids, has also improved. She's apparently been going to therapy on her own. While she hasn't shared many details, she does seem much less angry about what happened. We decided to have Thanksgiving together so we could talk things through with the kids. It was a bit messy, with plenty of tears, but we managed to get to a place where we all understand each other a bit better. We all agree that I shouldn't have waited so long to go through with the divorce, but my ex and kids also said they understand why I did it. My ex-wife and I even had a conversation about dating, which was weird but surprisingly kind of nice. My ex-in-laws still think I'm a horrible person, and most of them refuse to speak to me, but they've started treating my kids better. My kids spent Christmas Eve at their place and said it went okay. We talked about it on Christmas, and while they didn't share many details, they mentioned they planned to do something on New Year's Eve with my ex and the in-laws, which makes me happy. Sorry this isn't a juicy update with any dramatic twists, but I was bored during the holiday downtime and thought I'd log in to share some details. One thing I've learned from all of this, and I hope others can learn too, is that even if your heart is in the right place, it's probably better to end a marriage when it's truly over rather than maintaining a facade for years. I don't regret getting a divorce, but I do wish I hadn't waited 3 years after realizing it was over.